game-changing discussions on the big ideas that shape our thinking. This is One-to-One.
Affectionately known as TK, Tunde Kelani is one of Africa's most revered filmmakers. For more than 5 decades, his lens has framed some of our most important stories and shaped the soul of African cinema. From the political allegory of Saworoide to the literary elegance of Kushegbe, his work has preserved language, memory, and identity through generations, carrying African storytelling to the world with uncommon authenticity and grace. Tunde Kelani, welcome to One-to-One.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll dive straight in. I will begin by framing the context within which we will have our conversation. Okay. And I'll begin from a very unusual place. Orumuru, 1982 Nigerian comedy film. I remember seeing that as a boy at the National Theatre. I remember, in fact, where I was sitting at the National Theatre when I saw that. Directed, of course, by the great Ola Balogun. Written and produced by Moses Olaya Babasala. Exploring the impact and consequences of a get-rich-quick scheme. And of course, it makes the point that those were your beginnings. You started out in photography and cinematography long before becoming a film director. Of course, you went to the London Film School.
That's right.
But I'd like to know, at what point did you realize that storytelling, not just filmmaking, would become your life's work?
Well, it was interesting. In hindsight, I believe that I just needed a medium to share my cultural experience because I had observed everything in the environment that I found myself, and everybody told me stories. Even my peers, they picked on me. Sometimes they told me, so if anybody died in the community, they would tell me that the person was still around, that if I wanted to doubt it, give me a needle and say, you go and poke the corners of the room and you see what will happen to you. And I dared not, so I started to learn from that point. I soaked in everything I came in contact with. And so I started, they told me stories, all sorts of stories, and they thought about other world, Inwi, Oro, and things like that. I asked my grandfather one day if he had seen one, and he said yes, he had seen one. What did it look like? He tried to describe it to me. So my imagination just from that point. But what happened was within a few years, our education started in Yoruba language. All subjects were taught in Yoruba, including English language. And the school at that time had a library. And my friend, the late Dr. Bolade Oshinawa, was the librarian. So we just read everything up, anything we found in the library we read. And so in a few years, I entered the world of Diofagua. All the great imagination and everything. And then I started to read back to my grandfather at night, spread a mat, lie on my belly, and read to them. In return, I was telling them unbelievable stories, reading it back to them.
I had reversed it.
Reversed.
Interesting. But I'd like to talk about you and your beginnings, your formal training in film. So long before becoming a director, you trained extensively in photography and cinematography. I'm interested in learning how those disciplines shaped the way you see the world today. You see it, I'm sure, through a particular lens that is unique to Tunde Kelani.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, how did I get into photography in the first place? Because I didn't know anybody who was really a photographer. But I was conscious of what a camera could do. And so when I left secondary school, I returned to Lagos to my parents. And by that time, I was maybe 18 or so. And I got a job, but photography just was on my mind. So after working for about a year, I told my father I wasn't going to go university. No. I said it was going to be a waste of my time, that I would go straight into apprenticeship. So I wrote around for the photographers who were practicing then: Uncle Peter Obey, Jackie Phillips, Studio Billy Rose, and then Dr. Kubanjo. So it was Dr. Kubanjo that replied and invited me for an interview. And when I sat, talked to me, and I told him what I wanted, and he said, yes, I can train you for 3 or 5 years, and after that you go to Germany and all that. But he explained that he was not going to pay me at all. So I said, yes, I agreed. And he said, no, not so fast. You have to go and call your father, because all these young people, you have a school start. So I told my father and said, no, you will go and see him, that he knew him before in Oshogbo. And so we settled. That's how I started. But again, I'd read stories, books, literature, everything I could find. Even in Lagos, I was member of the library in Ebutimeta, and then on the island. And besides that, I've seen every film that came into Lagos. My favorite cinema was in Central Cinema in Ebutimeta. And occasionally I would venture. We had about 4 or 5 cinemas around the mainland. And these are neighborhood cinemas. You didn't have to ride Okada to reach them. Yes, we just walked. Central was my favorite, but occasionally I venture completely out to Pangrove area, where we had Metro Cinema, and then Rialto, the cheaper, at the back of Metro Cinema. Occasionally, I would go into the island to Plaza Cinema, and if I got a new girlfriend, I would go to Roxy Cinema.
You had to impress.
I just had to impress, and so on. So after a year at still photography, something told me, no, I prefer not one frame, one picture at a time, that I could do several frames. That would be motion pictures. So I was determined. I changed. And I was lucky because Western Nigerian television was at that time advertising Daily Times for trainee cine cameramen, and I applied. So 15 of us went for the aptitude test in WAEC, Yaba. 4 of us were invited for the interview at the broadcasting house in Ibadan, and I was the only one selected. So that's how my fortune changed. And in 1970 September, I walked into Western Nigerian television, WNTV, WNBS, PO Box 1460, Agodi Ibadan. So that's where my career really started. So I believe that from that point, I was a professional. And that was the best foundation I could have had, because I trained under the best broadcast managers in Africa at that time. They became my mentors, and I was on my way.
Interesting. Fascinating, in fact. So your storytelling is rooted very deeply in Yoruba literature, oral tradition.
Yes.
It may seem obvious, but I'd like you to spell it out.
It's not that obvious.
Exactly. Why does language matter so profoundly in your storytelling? What does it mean?
Language at that point is just not language. What I did basically after working in Western Nigerian television, again, the technology. My life is about the development of the technology. I've worked in any media of making motion pictures, starting from Standard 8, Super 8, and so on. Especially when I went to London Film School. in time, when I joined the television in Ibadan, we were shooting black and white, and I was just happy to be around the cameras, that I'd admired, that dreamt of. Of course, when you start like that, they give you the Bolex, which is 104, had 3 lenses on the turret. They give you a roll of film, which was something like 2 minutes. And then they sent you off to bring back a news report on 2 minutes, and then you did social diary and stuff like that. But I had a problem because my work was shown on those box television. And I thought, wow,
too narrow.
It's so disgraceful. How could my work compare with the screens I saw in the cinema? Now this box. So I said no. At first, I was excited, of course. If I had shot anything that was going to go on television, I call my friends just to show them that, you see, it's me that did that, and so on. And of course, the technology improved from negative black and white sound, magnetic sound came in, and then I worked with big cameras that had 404 rolls magazine, which was 10 minutes, and it had magnetic stripes, so we could do sound and all that. But 3 years after, I was dreaming of going to London Film School.
Right.
Because Uncle Tunde Kelani, God bless him, had E levels, and he had been to London Film School and back, and he was head of the film unit, so he became my mentor. And of course, engineer Tejuile, engineer Vincent Maduka, Ayogunlade, those were my mentors, Yinka Johnson, and the great broadcasters of that time. So I started they posted me to Lagos office, and then I realized that I needed to save to go to London Film School. So I changed to NBC TV because I could double my salary just if I made that jump. And in 1976, I was on the way to London Film School. I'd only paid for 1 year, so I thought, and my father and I, of course, we agreed that I would learn as much as possible. If I couldn't pay for the second year, I just come back and make the best of it. But luckily, finally, the NTA, they had, the government had nationalized Western Nigerian television. It was now NTA, and Uncle Vincent Maduka, who was the general manager at that time, was now the director general of NTA. So when I came for holidays to hustle for more money, I met him in the car park, and it was noticed that he hadn't seen me for some time. So I told him I was in London. So that's great. So I'm sure we funded that. I said no. They told me they were not interested in the course, and so I said So he said I should go and write them again and copy him. So they quickly agreed and obliged and paid for my second year in London Film School.
You went back.
I went back, and on the condition that I was placed on bond for 2 years, which I just managed complete. As soon as I complete, I just turned independent filmmaker, and then I now to really start my cinematic journey from that point. But what I did and thought I needed was to do adaptations, to find the writers. Arriba Faleti we did the Dilemma of Father Michael, that was my first co-production with some other people. And then I went further than that and found Professor Akimi Shola. And I started I just took his books and started to adapt the books. And I worked with other writers, Uncle Femi Ashofison, Wale Ogunyemi, Yinka Igbokare, Bayo Adibawale. I've adapted.
Of course.
And I think by now that I must have, in Africa, I probably must have been perhaps done more adaptation than anybody. I think I've done 8 or 9 now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Saworoide itself is
and so it's interesting because I went back to the academics and sort of befriended them and tried to pick their brains. and they accepted me as one of them because none of them brought their material and say they want to do this. I went to them and said, I want to.
I see. So you went to
I went to
people like Akimi Shala. Certainly you went to them.
I went to them. So, and we did Mami first, and then I did Cordelia.
Yes.
Written by him, of course.
Of course.
And I seem to have found the formula of adapting source materials and keeping the friendship between me and the writer. Because I know it's so delicate that what could have happened is the writer could say, see what you have done with my work, please don't put your name on the other work, and so on. But so far, I've been smiling. Yes, I've been sort of smiling, work with writers who are proud of what we have done.
And of course, those adaptations.
You are still on speaking terms.
Yes. Those adaptations from great writers like Akumi Shola, Femi Oshofison, they become cultural landmarks, haven't they? Those works are huge. But I'd like to ask you, I mean, we've just been talking about a very rich, deep history, where you're coming from. You've been creating serious cinema long before the name Nollywood emerged.
That's right.
How do you interpret the evolution of Nigeria's film industry through your lens in the last 40 years?
I think it's simple because when I came into broadcasting, we were shooting films every day because there's no video. And all perhaps the news content, drama inserts and program we filmed and brought into the broadcast chain at that time. And it was at that time that Kongi Service was released. And for the first time, these are Yoruba people on the screen, and our uncle, Francis Olale, was the producer, of these films with the company Capening that he started, so already all this blown, my fantasy and imagination that yes, I think we can do it, we could do it. So it's sort of, these are people that I knew and so on, but knowing physically is different from seeing them on the screen because they look like gods, Sometimes actors are transformed. And I'm coming from several influences, by the way, because I'm a fan of the Yoruba traveling theater. I have at least, you see, they started, traveling on stage. That's something on its own. And then they went into television, they went to radio, and they went into television. And after their television experience, they veered off into filmmaking and then started to make films as well. Baba,
Ogunde's story.
It was Adilove.
Adilove.
First of all, started with Dola Dipo and all of them. And then they made this own film, and I was privileged to work, on his movies as well. So he's one of my mentors also. And after that, Ogunde, went into film, and I became a mentee under Ogunde. And if Ogunde invites you and you work assisting the British technicians that came, and Ogunde invites you a second time, you are made for life because it's already known. You are, some qualities is noticed and decided to spend his time bringing you up and all that. I've had so many mentors, and influences. And so it was, for me, it was an evolution. We went from, then, of course, Ogunde shot his films in 35mm. He brought busy technicians. Olabarogun shot in 35mm as well, brought this Brazilian, South American technicians, and I worked with all of them. So this again was giving me sort of the experience that I can appropriate, because from London Film School, I knew that I had to find a way of appropriating technology, because nobody's going to give us £5 million to make a movie, not even £200,000. So we have to find a way. So we started to shoot 16 mil. And working with the Yoruba Traveling Theatre, I must have shot more than 20 of their own films as well. And that process, I recognized their style, which is small stage. And I tried to break it down in cinematic terms, which was another development for me also. And this is clearly different from films that I produce. Even now, if you pay attention, you could see these styles. You can recognize them and so on. So there are so many factors that, I've been asked, which of the Hollywood directors influenced you? I have been influenced by global cinema, Japanese, Chinese, Indian,
Right.
but more importantly, by the Yoruba Traveling Theatre. So I've been able to combine all these styles and come out with a style that is unique to me and my cultural experiences and so on. So when I come in contact with a material, the images start to come, and I begin to see the film in my head. If in my lifetime I saw Kola Ogmola on stage in the Pan One Dream Card in 1960 something, and then I've watched Oladipo on stage, I've watched Ogunde on stage, I've watched Onyadijobi on stage and worked with them, then you can have answer to the kind of style that I can bring into 21st century.
Absolutely. You've been involved with all of this, and now we have this vibrant market here in Nigeria, this film industry we call Nollywood, but really it stands on the shoulders of people like you.
Well, I think really that it's not as vibrant as we thought, and when Nollywood came, all the euphoria of being the second largest in the world, of what? Because at that time, the popular Nollywood was based on home video technology, analog, which was ridiculous in all its senses. But anyway, we started from rock bottom and tried to find our way up. Nollywood is in flux, it's still evolving. And after all, when I was in the film school, London Film School in 78, Nigeria was not considered a serious filmmaking nation. No, our time had not come, But behind it all, we had to continue to improve our game and, work on the deficit in infrastructure, a lot of capacity building, training, and all of that. And, by and by, we started to come up with products that attracted, the whole world. And look, if you talk about vibrant or not, what's in the news right now is Netflix going to buy the assets of one of the film companies, and they're offering $70 billion. All our industry put together for the last 20 years. There's not approach. No, not at all. So all that time, it was easy to see that where we could build on that popularity and publicity. After all, if you look at the infrastructures, America has about 40,000 screens. India has about 12 or 13,000 screens. And total screens in Nigeria is still under 500.
Yes.
So where is this number thing coming from? But it's okay. We embrace it. We take it. That means that we are going, and I'm so happy. See, what I like about Nollywood is about the diversity. Everybody, small businesses, just doing their own thing, finding their market, and so on. More importantly, I think we owe everything to our audiences who have stood by us and supported us, because, and we should never take them for granted because they encouraged us. They know that there's a lot of flaws in what we were doing, but they, for some reason, referred the worst Nollywood film to the best of American films, at that period in time. So they, and at that time, the government had not even taken notice. It was the popularity, the sovereignty, the soft diplomacy that finally carried the government along. And now, businesses are coming in, new models, and so on. But we cannot, until Africa generally develop our own platforms, something we can own.
Yes.
I think that we still have a lot of work to do.
So let's talk about the camera and the voice of social conscience. So I'd like us to talk about Saworoide for a bit.
Right.
1999.
Right.
A film written again by Ishola. Arguably one of the most politically symbolic and influential films in Nigerian history. Certainly one of your most iconic works. A biting allegory on power, tradition, corruption, and governance, and also tradition. I'd like to ask you, did you know at the time you were enacting this statement that it would outlive generations? And were you conscious of the cultural, the political statement that you were making at the time?
Well, it started in a strange way because Akim Ishola told me that there was a drummer in his village, somewhere in Akinyele local government in Ibadan, and I was one of the best drummers in Yoruba land. And I believed him and decided that we should do a documentary about him. And was this, we were thinking about just finding a direction for this documentary when one morning President Ishola called me and said, TK, wahala ma dey. Prof, like this is the drummer passed on. And it was devastating. But then we started to think about actually making a film using the talking drum as a voice for the people. So it started to take shape, and suddenly we saw it and how we are going to put this story together and link it together, and just followed our feelings and made Saworoide with modest means. In fact, it's the camera that I use, DVC 9000, is ridiculous, but it's I myself am surprised about how it's about the longevity,
Yes.
and so on.
So to what extent do you feel that film in particular has become a prophetic social commentary on the state of Nigeria's political evolution?
It's easy to predict because we are not being truthful, because I don't think we are developing. I'm also hopeful of a process of reorientation because somewhere along the way, I think we missed our way. And it's about time that I don't know, maybe it's too late, maybe not. I don't know what could happen because we saw it coming. And sometimes, even if I talk among family and friends, people just say, but TK, you were saying this thing 25 years ago.
Yes.
This is what you were saying 20 years ago, and so on. And I remember my friend, family, yesterday, we were childhood family friends until he passed on a few years ago. And what he says in conversation, I'm worried. Because sometimes you just said me, but I think TK, the way Nigeria is going, àwọn tó wà láyé wọ́n tún máa envy àwọn tó wà lọ́run. And that the people who are living, we actually envy those who are past.
But I'd like to talk about some of your other films. Thunderbolt, Ayinla, which is in 2021. Now, each of these films, there's a certain distinct cultural urgency to them. And looking across 5 decades of filmmaking, I'd like to know, which of your films do you feel has changed you the most as a person?
No, I don't feel the change, because I still have the passion that I have from day one. For me, it's doing those things. It's each one of the film, depending on the available resources at that particular time, meant something.
Yes.
For when you mention Ayinla, of course, I knew about Ayinla Omowura. I met him maybe twice in my life when I was young, but unmistakably, he's a master at his art. His Apala music is different, fast-paced and absolutely danceable and enjoyable. With the drummer, Adewale Onilola, so there's two of them. There's a chemistry between them that makes the music so special.
So thinking specifically about Ayinla, the 2021
all right, yes.
Production, I'd like to know what precisely drew you to the story of Ayinla Omowura.
Well, by the way, Abeokuta has always been the canvas to most of the films that I made. As a matter of fact, when we did Aruba, we didn't go to Osogbo, we shot it all in Abeokuta. We recreated the bank of the river, Ocean River, just with our Ogun River here, and built the wall. Isn't that so? Toluwanile and all of these things, they were all made in Abeokuta as a canvas. So the city is of interest to me, and it's one of the stars of the film, by the way, because Abeokuta in history was the darling of the colonial people, and they described it as a rising sun of the tropics or something like that, and on the one hand, then Ayinla on the other hand. So I had two stars on my hand, and I've seen the film in my head so many times. My father wanted me to have a preparatory class before I got into secondary school, and he chose my Miss Reverend Ransom Kuti, Mama, and took me to meet her, because the preparatory class was called Reverend Kuti Memorial Evening Classes, run by Mr. Gumbiade at that time, and it was in Ishabo, about more than 3 kilometers from our part of Abeokuta. And so my father wanted me to stay in the Kuti's family house. When we got there, and we sat, 3 of us, and Mama and my father, anytime that Mama would be talking to my father and then turn to me and say, sit right, and I would sit right. Chest forward, and I'll do chest forward. And after a while, it repeated itself again and again. But then they brought a boy who had misbehaved or something. He didn't walk by himself. They mounted him and brought him to Mama. Casually, without looking, she opened the drawer, brought out her cane, and gave her 3 strokes of cane, put it back, and they took the boy away. So for that point, I'd made up my mind. So when they concluded and she saw us off, I didn't say a word, and as soon as she turned back, I told my father, I'm not going to stay with this woman. Nothing will make me stay here. So I said, look, you can't walk, you can't trek all the way. I said, I will trek for 1 year. I will trek for 1 year. So he bought me a broad hat, and I did trek. And all this time, I got to know that city very well. every turn of it. I can describe how I worked it, So Abeokuta is always on my mind.
And it's the star of the movie Ayinla.
Oh yes, it is. I tried to document what was left of it after the ex-governor Amosu started the reconstructing the roads and all that. So basically, there will be something that I would want to include, put in the story. And I do gastronomy as well, food. I make sure I put a meal in it, something that is ours.
Of course.
No.
And of course, music inevitably was a huge part of that film. So what do you feel that you were able to unlock through music that dialogue could not?
What I got out of it completely was the film became popular among the youths who had never in their life, how could they? Because at that time, we were already celebrating 42 years after Ayinla had passed. And look at all these boys rushed after. I remember an event. I was traveling to Lagos, stopped at the Agege train station, and immediately made, for the restroom. And this boy chased me right inside. And as I started to do the business, I just say, "Excuse me, I say, listen, what do you want me to do?" And then after I finished, "What do you want to know?" And he already had the film on his mobile phone. And he said, "What is the title of that song?" So I said, "It's called Ogun Ajobo. I think it's on volume 4 or something like that." And he thanked me. I was going to go, and I said, "Come back. How old are you?" And he said, "He's 27. So that's what I got out of it. It was made popular by all these young people, suddenly connected with the history and the music of Ayinla Omowura.
Okay, so I have a rider to that question, but I'll ask you an interim question first. So what do you think about the work that this gentleman is doing? A friend of mine, Olalekan Fabilola and Masoebu. Is that helpful work?
He's a dreadful young man.
He is.
Because I told him when I saw him that there's nothing he could do that could make me, come to that program, because I will fail.
He told everyone's high standards.
It was so embarrassing that I couldn't survive it.
Yes.
And I love it. I like it, because it's vast in the culture.
Yes.
And hopefully people might, begin to benefit by just the sheer, not just the entertainment value, but the knowledge that is attached to it.
Sure. So I ask these questions really to ask another broader question. Of course, we're talking about the preservation of Yoruba culture. Of course, that is very, very important to Yoruba people, and it is a significant part of a wider, a broader picture that we call the national consciousness. How important is it for culture generally, all cultures, to be preserved in order to preserve this sense of national consciousness?
It's not just, I don't think the first challenge is not about preservation, because I'm afraid it could become extinct. And, I work, interact with intellectuals as well who have proved that there's been no African country that developed with a foreign language. And that is key. And for me, it was no brainer. I knew what I was going to do, and that my work was going to be mainly for the Yoruba, 35 million, 40 million in the homeland, and even spread in pockets all over the world. What else? What words would I do? After all, we have subtitled our films in English, French, and we have Saworoide in Portuguese. We can subtitle in Portuguese already, and so on. So I wonder how Akim Ishola would feel if they were alive now. And I miss them. You understand? I miss them because those were genuine, patriotic Yoruba people who went away from first degree. Akinjola had his first degree was in French. Adiba Fale's first degree was in French also. But they just left and then came back and started their scholarship in the language and culture. And there are books and books that are part of our heritage, which we no longer read. Nobody will read them. The children, we never read them, and so on.
Yeah.
And you see, and our survival, our economic turnaround is on our intangible heritage. There's no doubt about it.
Indeed. Indeed. So as I mentioned earlier, you began life in film as a photographer, as we discussed, and cinematographer, long before becoming a film director. But it would appear that you have come full circle. You recently published the following announcement. Bear with me, I will read. This was after the completion of your short film teaser,
Okay.
the new Kushebe.
That's right.
You said, after decades of filmmaking, this camera has returned me to the excitement of discovery. You were speaking about the new ZR camera, the eyes to shoot the film.
Yeah.
I feel ready for a new era of visual storytelling, bolder, more experimental, and deeply rooted in our culture.
Right.
This is my new cinematic beginning.
That's right.
So you're ready to start again. Tell me, unpack that for me. What precisely do you mean by that?
No, I've always been excited by positive technology. When I see one, I can recognize it. Because all along, I've tried to appropriate, because I work as an independent producer, I work in low budget. And sometimes I've donated everything I have, including myself, because why was it possible to make those films in the first place? Because my skills were donated. I didn't get paid for them and so on. But the technology today, in Nigeria, we started so modestly. And then somehow we got lost in the technology by the introduction of the original red camera, which cost a fortune. Everybody started to, aspire to use the red for their work and so on. So that piled, the production budget so up. And I go on I'm sort of a minimalist, you understand. To make a film, I will lay my hands on anything that's available and then do the rest and so on. So it got to become so fashionable to use the cameras costing $80,000, $50,000 and have a big chunk of the budget on just the technical, the camera and so on. And then Nako now bought the almighty red and put a bit of the red technology in a small body, So in other words, it's this is a high technology with a low cost. Perfectly ideal for the independent filmmaker.
Continuing to speak about young African filmmakers, the huge advantage they have with technology, smartphones, but they also face a crisis of identity and a pressure to imitate Western styles. So what advice would you give to them about honoring their roots while being globally competitive?
They should just turn around, process of turn around to their own culture.
Yes.
That is your currency. There's no doubt about it. It is there. So we need to somehow have a program to bring them back. So just take a look at, what we already have in terms of intangible heritage. Everything is there. Books, music, history, an aspect of history. And that's why I did Cornelia, which I can mention that just a glance back into history in one of when the military dictator.
Lovely film. I went to see it when it opened.
But it is generally ignored.
Yes, it's a lovely,
because I don't know. Of course, I'm still very hopeful that somehow turn around and have a look at that film.
So after 5 decades of work, tell me, what continues to inspire you? You're here, you're hungry, you're still making film. What's the secret? What continues to inspire you?
Well, I think it's my passion. I have a great passion for what I do. And in a way, I think that I can see sometimes in the future. And I'm busy at the moment because I try to be on top of the technology at all times. And we are in an exciting technological era, and I see the possibilities of what can be done and try as much as anybody who is willing, and I'm open, because I think we can redefine how we tell our stories.
So we've already talked about the fact that there are so many untapped stories still to tell, so many literary works from the belly of our culture that needs to be told. And I dare say not just in Yoruba culture, across the Nigerian, across.
I'm sorry to take it out of your mouth because I'm a bit disappointed because we have not even reflected the unity in diversity, our national slogan, because the films have not really reflected our diversity. We should see all shades of the rainbow of what the Nigerian nation is. Of course, when there is disorder, where there is chaos and disorder in the society, the arts suffer. But I want to believe this is only temporary. And in good time, I think we start the reorientation and march towards our goal.
So there exists a plethora of opportunities, many, many stories still to tell. But I will ask you, Uncle TK, Mr. Tunde Kelani.
Or TK,
Or TK.
Yeah.
What is the one story you feel still compelled to tell?
Several stories.
You wouldn't stick up one. Several.
No, I don't. Look, without mentioning you from was saga, all the books. There are books all around me. We are so many.
If you had a choice, what was the one that you would really love to tell that hasn't been told?
Ayédáyé is a white man's world by Delano. And I think that if that book has been written in English language, it will rival Things Fall Apart.
Tunde Kelani, thank you for joining us on One-to-One.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you.